Can I not be in the video?
Yes.
It's cold.
Welcome back, Faction. I want to give you guys a quick update on where this Coyote Bronco is headed and everything we've done to date. So we've got the motor situated in the car. It is looking really good. It is all mounted the way that it should be. It's got the clearances. We might add some shims here in a little while that we're going to make just to get a little bit more clearance on one area. We've got a connector kind of near the alternator and the steering, the electronic steering rack. We want to give it a little bit more clearance, and so we think that adjusting our mounts or throwing in a shim might be able to do that for us. That's really the only thing that we need to add. We'll double check all of that again down the road. But what we finished up in the last week or two is getting all of the coolant lines plumbed, and so we've got the main coolant lines coming off of the Coyote to the radiator to the expansion tank over there, all the way around. I think there's probably 3 or 4 different spots on the motor itself that has coolant inflow or outflow, and then we've got a couple of different coolers on here. So we've got the transmission cooler originally from the F-150. It's a lot bigger than the one that's on the Ranger or Bronco motors. I'm sorry, the Ranger or Bronco transmissions, 10R80 or 10R60. And then we've got the oil cooler right down here. We just threw a new oil filter on that guy. So that's got plumbed in there as well. So between those coolant lines for the transmission and for that oil cooler, we got those routed in there. And then we had to throw in this auxiliary pump. This is a standard F-150 or Bronco feature to get coolant flowing before the actual thermostat opens. So that's plumbed in there. The one oddity for some of the F-150s is we've got a diverter valve that we threw up here, kind of behind this guy a little bit, but you can see this guy. We've got attached to the motor. The really cool part about this is most of the coolant lines go with the engine if we ever need to take it back out. And so really there's only like 3 or 4, I think, the expansion, this pump on both sides, and then the heater core are really the only things we have to undo. Everything else is attached to the motor already, and then of course the radiator. But those are really nice quick snap connectors that we have. And on this one, we actually have it on both ends, on the radiator and on the Coyote. And so that's really ideal to have that. Okay, so what else have we been working on? We've got the battery tray. That is, for the most part, situated now that it clears. This hump was our issue with the motor. We made a very, I would say, factory-like modification to that part. I'll probably throw up some pictures of it here. We could pretty much just notch it out, very similar to how they did it. We wanted to keep the band that ultimately captivates it on this side of the battery tray. We may end up trying to cut that to get it a little bit more space. I think we've got like 1/4 of an inch right now. But if we want to, we could probably cut that area, and then we have a ratchet kind of clamp. It's not ratchet, but it's one of those kind of clamps that you hold batteries down with, that we might fixate to the overall clamp that we have there, just to make sure that it can't move this direction while driving or any kind of vibration movement. We got the alternator in. The clearance is looking really good between the ABS lines. Same for the steering rack. We got that painted up. To do the modification there, we had some bare metal. The other thing is we painted up these guys, which is where the original cross member bar went for the upper body. And actually, I have a little piece of tape there still that I need to get rid of. Anyway, we'll go and deal with it later. So we got that bar, the original metal that we had to drill through, that is now recoated. And then this beautiful bar over here that we repainted, because unfortunately Ford just didn't have the time to properly paint this piece, and there's a bunch of primer showing all throughout it. Really nice match to the color in the Bronco already. That has, I believe, a total of 10 bolts, 5 on each side, a couple of M10s, a couple of M8s, top and sideways. You can see the holes here for those M10s on both sides, and then we reused some of the holes. Basically, what we did is we reused some of the stock spot weld holes. We finished drilling them out, and then we used M10 and M8 flange head bolts and nuts on the other side. So basically we made it a removable section, so it's way easier to get the motor straight in and straight out, rather than trying to play games with going up and using the engine hoist to do a bunch of little weird stuff. So we're going to go ahead and throw that back on, but we're still dealing with a few things here on the front. We've got the Supercharger pulley system here, just double checking things. We're ultimately going to go back to the original NA configuration to get this thing started for the first time. And on that note, for the NA configuration, we will have a 4-inch tube, and we are making a custom printed out of, I believe, composite glass reinforced ABS, or I forget one of the materials we're going to use for this, ultimately for the heat, since the headers are over here. But regardless, we got a custom piece that's going to bring this out, much like the V6 Bronco does, out and around and into the air intake that you see here. So that part will be easy. The unfortunate part is when we go with the Whipple that we have and finally get it made it on here and plumbing it. So not only will we have to plumb the air, but we also have that extra coolant for the Supercharger. We're getting some air-to-water intercoolers to try out for replacement of the original air-to-air for the turbo system, some pumps, some reservoir tanks, things like that for the Supercharger side. But the unfortunate part is the actual air intake for the Supercharger on all the Whipples comes out towards the driver's side, since most all the vehicles, F-150, Mustang, Chargers, things like that, all of those have the air boxes on the driver's side right about here. Unfortunately, that's where our battery is. We haven't fully committed to having the battery over here, but I think we're pretty set on it. I think the big thing is it's way easier for when we integrate this loom, which is kind of what we're starting to do now, to have all of the original formation of connectors and so forth on this side. So that's one of the main reasons we want to do it, really just to simplify it and make it as close to OEM as we can get. But because of that, we have to pretty much end up using a 180 or so offshoot to come around from the intake here, out around, and then into our same position over here. So not ideal. We lose some airflow because of that hard bend. Not really anything we can do about it. We want to go with the Whipple. It's really the best one out at the time of the filming here for the, especially for the Coyotes, but for really Superchargers in general. The other options, I know Eaton, Edelbrock, a few folks like that. I think there's one that does come off right off the side, and the snout's right here. That wouldn't be too bad. The Supercharger isn't as good though, so we really weren't interested in going down that route. And then the other one, which I know a lot of people would say, well, you could just swap in a 5.2, and it comes with its 265 Eaton. I think it was probably who made that blower as well, or IMI. That blower would be perfect for this because its intake is right here. And then ultimately we could go in just like the stock air intake that we see here. We would be able to plumb it. That would be ideal. Unfortunately, I'm doing some more research to see if we could swap that out in the future. Ultimately, you know, this 5.0 is replaceable with a 5.2, so it doesn't really matter one way or another. You could throw the 5.2 blower on it. So that is one option, but for us, it's pretty much just what we're dealing with right now to get the blower that we want to on this, because we really like that Whipple blower. It's just so good in terms of efficiency and power capability right now. So so that's kind of what the plan is. We've got the PCM, ECM in here as well. We've got the shroud from the V6, fits in exactly the way it should. All of the cables that you can see here, these are our engine and trans cables. Ultimately, those will go in these two slots. And then we've got a vehicle harness that we're custom making with the original vehicle harness to give what we need to for the rest of the vehicle here, BCM, and some of the other sub functions. And then fuse box will be another one. But we'll leave all the electronic stuff. That's a whole nother story. But in terms of the Mechanical bits, like I said, alternators looking good, not gonna have any issues there. Got to throw the pulleys back on. AC, we're pretty much leaving for the last point. We know we'll have space to run the AC lines. That's never really an issue. We'll have pretty much a combination of lines and then some custom lines for the original actual inside cabin portions of the evaporator, sticking with that stock condenser up front, and then the compressor pump itself, we will probably end up going with a new Mustang pump that has all the solenoids and all the features we need, as well as a six rib pulley, since we have the ATI damper pulley on this crank as well. So we want to obviously keep that as much as possible. The Mustang setup really is a lot better than the F-150 setup for the Whipple. So that's one of the reasons why we want to do that mod. Otherwise, pretty much all the AC stuff would have to be changed anyway, so it doesn't matter what pump we're using ultimately, since it's just clutch, a solenoid, and then a pressure for that system. So yeah, ABS is looking good, coolant is looking good, vacuum, things like that. We are just getting the final stuff in order. What we're gonna do next is lift this guy up, get a few things bolted onto it, and more importantly, get the fuel tank inserted back in. We've got our wiring harness pretty much situated for that. We've got a quick connect for a booster pump to get higher flow once we get the Whipple in there, so we'll probably go over that more in the future. But yeah, we'll get the fuel pump in there, get everything on the bottom situated, and yeah, from there on out, I think we're going to be focusing on electrical. We've got our station over there that we've been working on for the last couple of weeks on getting all of our custom looms and all of our signals and so forth, and doing some coding on the computers and modules. So that's pretty much where this is transitioning. I think long term, we'll take it out from the lift and throw it over there, move some stuff around, and it will stay over there so that we can run diagnosis and do a few test things. The other last bit, we have not covered over the rest of the exhaust system yet. We're kind of holding off on that right now, since obviously we have the straight dump headers. We can at least get it started real quick and see if there's any issues with those. But ultimately, we already have the design laid out. We already have all the parts for the rest of the exhaust system. It's not too hard, and one thing that we're waiting on is our custom drive shafts, which I'll probably go into in a little while. Once we have that front drive shaft, that's key to make sure we have clearance around it, so we're definitely waiting on that first before we take the plunge into the exhaust system. So should be a really exciting episode there. Love making exhaust work, especially with trying to keep this an emission compliant vehicle and all that stuff. Really excited. So all right, that is the update so far. We are going to go and do some more work today and get that gas tank, like I said, in, and yeah, take care of a few things, get this thing ready to get the electronics situated. All right, guys, so we've been doing a little bit of work off camera, but I wanted to go ahead and update you on the progress for these coolant lines. So what we were doing, I think when I last left off, we were trying to throw this guy on. I realized with the help of John that we needed to get the Supercharger conversion plate, and this one for this Whipple is for a Mustang. Get it on there, and by putting that new tensioner, which is for the Whipple, which would sit right here where the throttle body is about right now, that would be in the way of where this original transmission cooler diverter system is when I had it mounted up off of a stud. So what we're running right now is we've got some Adele clamps mounted off of 2 points as well, and we'll probably end up throwing a third bracket, which is going to another mounting point underneath of this hose. So we'll have 3 points on this. It's already really rigidly built up, but we've got the coolant lines I've ran underneath of the motor right now for the in and out of the transmission cooler. We'll show you guys in a little while once we get the car up in the air what those look like. We still got to put some thermal insulation on the lower section on this side for the header that's nearby. But right now we've got some of the snakeskin sleeving on there. It's looking pretty good. Same for the pass over to the heater core for these two lines. You can see right here, looking pretty good coming up. One's a 5/8, one's a 3/4 going into that. And then I just need to reroute this guy. We just got some sleeve on it around the motor and off into this guy. And then the same for the easy ones right here. We got some breeze clamps on there right now instead of the constant tension ones. I really do like these, so we might switch them out later to constant tension, but otherwise these are really good. So at least for a while, for prototyping and kind of testing everything out, this should be the coolant system we run with. Everything else pretty much set up. We'll run a little bit more snakeskin on some of these hoses, make sure they don't have any abrasion issues, and throw some thermal tape where we think we might need it. Otherwise, we're pretty close on all of the coolant, and we're moving along now on the electrical. So once we get all the coolant stuff situated, we'll probably throw in the gas tank and get everything on the clip done. The other thing we'll update you guys on is the modifications for the front crossbar for the upper body. We've got that now modified. You can kind of see there a little bit, 4 holes going into the front of that upper body section, and we've got, I think, like 6 or 8 bolts total, about 4 or so on each side, 8s and 10 metric going through there to take up the spot welds, the 24 total that were on this thing. So that should be quite sturdy on that guy. So once everything's situated and we're happy, we'll get that back in there. But before that, we're going to do some more test fitting with the alternator, and we already got that AC unit in there, if I forgot to mention, so that we had clearance for the routing. We'll get everything in, we'll get these hoses strapped in and get positions for those to be mounted down so they're not swinging around, risking damage with the belt here, both belts. So anyway, we got more to talk about on the AC stuff, but that'll come later. But we're gonna go and do some more test fits and then get this thing up in the air. All right, guys, so we got the Bronco lifted up, and here's probably the first time that we'll see underneath the car since we've thrown the motor in. Kind of give you guys a tour. We've done a little bit of work off camera, getting, again, some heat shields and so forth for the exhaust, but you can kind of see here just how freaking amazing this thing looks inside of the Bronco platform here on the T6. So let's see, starting up front, we got the clearance again on that oil pan. Still got our tape there for when we take it out so we don't scratch the oil pan. There it is. And moving along over here, you can see our work for the passenger side exhaust. We've got this coolant pipe coming out of one of the sides of the oil to water cooler for the transmission. It's crossover line over there, all protected with snakeskin. Starter up there, we got a shield on it as well. Our new shields for the exhaust will be running here. Another separate shield for the exhaust underneath the trans pan, since we have the trans essentially moved further back. It fits where normally the exhaust would have been routed over for the inline 4 or for the V6 models. A lot of the Ford vehicles do it like this, and so we'll have to cross it over. We'd love to go right through here, but unfortunately the gas tank completely blocks that access, so we'll get that in here in a little while once we're done checking a few things on the electrical. So here is the transfer case from the Everest, looking straight at the Bronco diff, and then our exhaust header that we'll have routed around that. This side's heat shielding. Again, the exhaust will have to be routed through this tube over here, which will be quite a feat. We probably will have to still end up doing a Y pipe just because dual exhaust through that is a little tough. I know on the Raptor, we looked underneath one the other day, and I think they try and do dual exhaust kind of running together over here, but I know they're only at about 2.5 inch. So we'll see if we can physically get 3 inches over here when we finally get around to doing the exhaust on this guy, but it might be a little tough. And then finally moving to the back of the powertrain, here is the attachment for the transfer case transmission to our modified cross member. And we've got the output for the rear prop shaft going straight through the hoop. Another good look on both sides of that exhaust coming off the V8. And other than that, that pretty much is the rest of the things that we've modified. We got a couple of cables and so forth that we're dealing with over here, getting all the fuel and so forth plumbed. Once we get our first wiring loom out of the way, we'll be throwing the fuel tank that is right here back into the vehicle and able to get that guy remounted up there. Its lines are right there, the evap canister, etc., to make it all emissions compliant. All that stuff connected back together is the plan for the short term. But in the meantime, we're probably going to be working on some loom stuff for a little bit, and we have some of the Supercharger components in for like the air-to-water intercooler on the front. We're going to try and replace it where the air-to-air originally was. But yeah, we'll go into detail in that in a second. But yeah, here's just a quick overview of what it's looking like underneath the vehicle now. You guys seen plenty on top of the last few episodes, but finally able to see how well it looks with those Coyote exhaust flanges coming off of it. Perfect fit. So we got a little bit more work to do, but we're pretty darn close mechanically.